The headlights cut through the heavy rain and revealed a sight no father should ever have to witness. On the front porch of his own home, two small figures huddled together, drenched from head to toe, their pajamas clinging to their shivering bodies. His twin daughters, barely 6 years old, were clutching each other for warmth, their eyes wide with both fear and relief the moment they recognized his car. He slammed the brakes and ran out, his heart racing faster than it ever had before, his voice cracking as he pulled them into his arms. One of the girls looked up at him, water streaming down her cheeks, and whispered with a trembling voice, "Daddy, we knew you would come back. She told us not to tell." In that instant, he realized nothing in his life, not love, not trust, not even family itself, was what he thought it was. What waited behind that front door would shatter everything he believed about loyalty, marriage, and protection. The strange car in the driveway, the dim glow from the upstairs window, the silence of a house that once overflowed with laughter. All of it told him this was not going to be the homecoming he expected. And as he tightened his grip on his daughters, trying to steady their trembling, he understood that whatever he was about to see would not only change his marriage, but would redefine the very meaning of fatherhood. With his children clinging to his soaked shirt, he took a deep breath and pushed the door open. What he saw next changed everything he thought he knew about love and family. Would you have stormed inside immediately, or grabbed your kids and walked away? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. His name was Daniel Carter, a man who had built his life around hard work, faith, and the promise he made long ago to a woman he once loved more than anything. Before tragedy struck, Daniel had been married to Emily, his college sweetheart. Together they dreamed of raising a family filled with laughter and love, and though Emily's life was cut short when their twin daughters were only 3 years old, Daniel held on to her memory with unwavering devotion. Every night he read the twins their bedtime stories, and when they asked about their mother, he painted her picture with words, gentle, kind, and strong. Friends called him too protective, but Daniel only knew one truth. His daughters were all he had left of Emily, and nothing mattered more than keeping them safe. That was the vow that shaped every decision he made. For years, Daniel lived only for Jasmine and Jade. His world was work by day and fatherhood by night. The girls, now 6, carried pieces of their mother in their smiles and in the way they hugged him so tightly after school. They made drawings of houses with 4 stick figures, always including their late mother in the corner, with angel wings. Daniel tried to give them the warmth they craved, but deep down, he wondered if his daughters needed something more. A woman's presence. A motherly touch. That lingering fear made him vulnerable when he met Laura, the woman who seemed to offer exactly what he and his children needed. Laura had a warm smile, the kind that disarmed you instantly, and she carried herself with a grace that felt reassuring. To everyone around Daniel, she looked like the answer to his prayers. Laura stepped into their lives gently at first, like a careful guest. She brought the girls small gifts, braided their hair, and read them bedtime stories in her soft voice. For Daniel, who had spent years carrying the weight alone, her presence felt like relief. She laughed easily, cooked elaborate meals, and filled the house with a kind of brightness that made others remark on how lucky he was to have found her. And yet, beneath her careful charm, there were small moments Daniel should have paid closer attention to. A flicker of irritation when the twins compared her to their late mother. A sharp glance when Jasmine interrupted her conversation. A whispered, "Don't bother your father with little problems," when the girls sought comfort. At first, Daniel ignored those glimpses, convincing himself they were nothing more than the normal adjustments of a blended family. He told himself the girls were still learning to accept change, and Laura was simply trying to set boundaries. But the twins noticed. In their innocence, Jasmine and Jade still clung to their drawings, their memories of Emily, and the bedtime prayers they whispered to their mother. They carried their grief in ways only children could, small rituals, questions that came late at night, and the quiet habit of holding hands whenever they felt uncertain. And whenever Laura overheard those private moments, the warmth of her smile seemed to vanish, replaced by something harder, colder, though always hidden when Daniel was near. At first, Laura's sharpness was subtle, the kind of thing Daniel never noticed when he was busy with work. She began with small interruptions, moments when the twins reached for their father's attention after a long day. If Jasmine came running with a picture she had drawn, Laura would intercept her gently but firmly, saying, "Not now, your dad's tired." When Jade wanted to sit on Daniel's lap during dinner, Laura would insist the girls eat at their own side of the table. To Daniel, these seemed like harmless boundaries, but to the girls it was the start of a quiet separation. Slowly, their time with their father grew shorter, their voices dimmer, as Laura positioned herself between them and the man they trusted most. The house that once rang with bedtime stories and laughter began to feel quieter, colder, even though Daniel couldn't see it yet. The cruelty grew bolder when Daniel wasn't home. Laura had a way of twisting words until Jasmine and Jade questioned their own memories. If the girls complained that she had scolded them harshly, Laura would tilt her head, sigh, and whisper, "Your dad doesn't want to hear your whining. He works too hard for this family. Do you want to make him unhappy?" The twins, too young to argue, believed her. They began to doubt themselves, wondering if they were really as ungrateful and difficult as Laura said. To Daniel, they still smiled when he was home, but their laughter carried a nervous edge, like children afraid of making a mistake. It was gaslighting in its cruelest form, teaching them to bury their pain in silence and protect their father from truths he desperately needed to know. Mockery followed silence. When Jasmine stumbled over a reading assignment, Laura smirked and said, "Maybe your sister's the smart one." If Jade spilled water at the table, Laura clapped slowly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Bravo, you managed to ruin dinner again." These humiliations were always private, never in Daniel's presence. The girls quickly learned to hide their tears, wiping them away in dark corners of their shared room, holding each other tight so Laura wouldn't hear. They grew quieter at school, less confident with friends, carrying shame too heavy for children so young. To outsiders, Laura was still the doting stepmother, but behind closed doors she was chipping away at the girls' spirit piece by piece. One night, Laura's cruelty crossed into something unforgettable. A drizzle had started outside, light at first, nothing that would harm a child, but it was enough to chill the air. Jasmine and Jade had argued with her about bedtime, asking for one more story, just one more prayer to their late mother. Laura's patience snapped. She grabbed their small hands, dragged them to the porch, and shut the door. "If you don't know how to listen, you can sit out here until you do." The twins sat shivering in the damp night, clutching each other as the drizzle turned into a steady rain. By the time Laura let them back in, their pajamas were soaked, their hair plastered to their faces. She handed them towels with a cold smirk and told them to stop being dramatic before sending them to bed. That night, the girls whispered to each other in the dark, wondering how much more they could endure. It was a Thursday evening when Daniel's meeting ended earlier than expected. The storm had rolled in heavy, thunder rattling his truck as he drove the long road home. He hadn't told Laura he was coming early. In fact, part of him was excited to surprise his daughters, maybe read them a story before bed. As his headlights swept across the driveway, Daniel's chest tightened. A car he didn't recognize sat parked in front of his house. The rain hammered against his windshield as he slowed, questions swirling in his mind. Why would someone else's car be here so late? He gripped the steering wheel tighter, telling himself there had to be an explanation. But as he pulled into the drive and noticed no toys scattered across the yard, no sound of laughter inside the house, his unease grew into dread. The storm cracked above him as he stepped out of the truck, water soaking through his shirt within seconds. He hurried toward the porch, and that was when his heart nearly stopped. There, curled against each other in the corner, were Jasmine and Jade, shivering in their thin pajamas, rain dripping down their small faces. Their eyes lit up when they saw him, and they scrambled into his arms, clutching him with desperate relief. "Daddy, we knew you would come back." Jasmine whispered, her lips trembling. She told us not to tell. Daniel held them tighter than he ever had before, his mind spinning with fear and rage. Why were his daughters outside left to shiver in the storm, while another car sat parked in his driveway? He wrapped them in the emergency blanket from his truck, kissed their damp hair, and told them to lock the doors. Stay here. Don't come out until I say. His voice shook with a fury he could barely contain. As he turned back toward the house, lightning flashed, illuminating the upstairs window. A light burned softly there, and faintly, through the storm's noise, Daniel heard laughter. But it wasn't the laughter of his children. It was deeper, carefree, the kind of laughter that had no place in a house where his daughters were sitting outside in the rain. Every step toward the front door felt like walking into the unknown, his hands trembling as he slid the key into the lock, the silence pressing down on him harder than the storm itself. The door swung open, revealing the familiar hallway now cloaked in an eerie quiet. The family photos stared back at him, reminders of a life he thought was safe. He moved slowly, each creak of the floor echoing like a warning. Then he heard it. Voices from the bedroom upstairs, hushed but unmistakable. He climbed the staircase, his pulse pounding in his ears, the storm outside raging in perfect rhythm with his fury. He pushed the door open, and in a single instant the illusion of his marriage collapsed. Laura was in his bed with another man, so wrapped up in each other they barely noticed his presence. When Laura finally met his eyes, it wasn't guilt he saw. It was defiance. And when she looked me in the eye, it wasn't guilt I saw. It was defiance. Do you think she thought she would get away with this forever? Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, his daughter's frightened whispers still echoing in his mind. Laura pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her eyes meeting his without shame. The man beside her scrambled for his clothes, stammering apologies as he hurried past Daniel, but Daniel never moved. His focus was locked on his wife. For a long moment he didn't speak. He didn't shout, didn't rage. His silence was heavier than thunder, more dangerous than fury. Finally, his voice cut through the room, low and steady. My children are outside, Laura. In the rain. Why? She rolled her eyes, as if he were the one at fault. Don't be dramatic, Daniel. They're fine. A little rain never hurt anyone. You've been gone so much you wouldn't understand how difficult it is here. Her dismissiveness only deepened the storm brewing inside him, but he remained calm. Answer me, he said, his voice like steel. Laura tried to shift the story, her tone laced with false innocence. Daniel, you're overreacting. He's just a friend. It didn't mean anything. You've been distant, and I needed comfort. She adjusted her robe, feigning vulnerability, but Daniel wasn't moved. You left my daughters outside while you lay with another man in my home. That's not comfort. That's betrayal. Laura's composure cracked then, anger replacing her pretense. Be careful, Daniel. I know things about you, about Emily, about this family. If you think you can just throw me out, I'll make sure you regret it. You'll lose everything, your business, your reputation. And those girls? They'll grow up thinking their father destroyed their family. For a moment, the room was filled with the raw standoff between a man who had built his life on love and a woman determined to manipulate fear. Daniel's calm never broke. The only thing I regret, he whispered, is ever letting you near them. The following days revealed truths Laura never thought would see the light. With Daniel finally watching closely, Jasmine and Jade began to speak. At first, their voices trembled, their words hesitant, but once the dam broke, the details poured out. They told their father about the mockery, the times Laura had called them ungrateful, the nights she told them, "Your dad doesn't want to hear your whining." They whispered about being locked outside, about the cold rain soaking their skin while Laura sat inside unmoved. Most haunting of all, they confessed how she had made them promise never to tell, warning that if they did, something bad would happen to their father. Daniel listened with tears in his eyes, his hands trembling as he realized how blind he had been. His twins had been carrying this burden in silence, protecting him the only way they knew, through their dreams, their whispers, their courage. Daniel wasted no time. He filed for divorce immediately, and what followed was a battle Laura had never anticipated. In the courtroom, she tried to maintain her polished image, the doting wife, the misunderstood stepmother. But the testimonies of Jasmine and Jade shattered that illusion. The judge listened as two small girls, with voices shaking but eyes steady, recounted nights of fear, humiliation, and neglect. Teachers testified to the sudden change in the girls' behavior at school, their fading laughter, their reluctance to speak up. Neighbors recalled seeing the twins outside at odd hours, confused and alone. Piece by piece, Laura's carefully built facade crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. Every accusation she had dismissed as exaggeration was now documented, supported, and laid bare for all to see. The woman who once smiled her way into Daniel's home was exposed as the very danger he had failed to recognize. Outside the courtroom, the humiliation was swift and merciless. Friends who once envied Daniel's perfect new wife turned away in disgust. The same community that had praised her charm now whispered about her cruelty. Parents at the twins' school kept their distance, unwilling to let their children near a woman accused of locking little girls outside in the rain. The reputation she had guarded so fiercely was gone, replaced by a shadow she could never escape. Every social circle she once moved through with ease closed its doors. Her name, once tied to grace and generosity, became a cautionary tale of deceit. The woman who wanted so badly to be admired was now defined by shame, and no amount of forced smiles could erase the truth. For Laura, social ruin was only the beginning of her fall. Financially, her downfall was just as brutal. Laura had entered the marriage believing she would secure comfort and power, but the divorce revealed a different reality. Daniel's lawyers ensured every receipt, every hidden bank withdrawal, every attempt she made to siphon funds was brought into the open. The prenuptial agreement, once dismissed by her as a mere formality, became her undoing. She walked away with nothing. No home, no access to Daniel's growing business, no claim to the security she had plotted to gain. The life she tried to steal collapsed in her hands like sand through her fingers. Daniel's victory wasn't about wealth, it was about principle. Every dollar she lost was a symbol of justice, every closed door a reminder that betrayal carried a price. For Daniel, justice wasn't found in shouting or vengeance. It was in watching Laura's empire of lies collapse under its own weight. He never raised his voice, never stooped to her cruelty. Instead, he stood beside Jasmine and Jade, holding their hands as truth dismantled the woman who once controlled them. Each punishment fit the betrayal. For the lies, she faced exposure. For the mockery, she faced public shame. For the financial schemes, she left empty-handed. For the abuse of two innocent girls, she carried a permanent stain on her name that no courtroom could ever erase. In the end, Laura's greatest punishment was the one she inflicted on herself. The loss of the family she pretended to love and the respect she desperately craved. And as Daniel walked his daughters out of that courthouse, he knew the scales had finally been balanced. When the dust of the courtroom settled and the papers were signed, Daniel returned to the only thing that had ever mattered: his daughters. Jasmine and Jade were still young, but their eyes had already seen more pain than children should ever carry. For months, Daniel rearranged his life to ensure that they never again felt the emptiness of abandonment. He scaled back his long hours, reshaped his business around a schedule that kept him home for bedtime, breakfasts, and the small everyday rituals they had been missing. Every day he reminded them through action and word that their voices mattered, their laughter was wanted, and their father would never fail to listen. Slowly, the walls of silence that Laura had built around them began to crack. The girls began to smile again, not the polite smiles they used to hide fear, but the uninhibited kind that rang through the house like bells. It was in the little things that Daniel noticed the healing. Jasmine once again sprawled across the living room floor with crayons, drawing pictures of a family that now showed only 3 figures: herself, Jade, and her father, happy, whole, and together. Jade rediscovered her boldness, reading aloud with confidence, no longer silenced by mockery. They began to argue like sisters do, not out of fear, but because the home felt safe enough for them to express themselves. Daniel cherished even those moments of chaos because they meant his daughters were free again. Their bedtime stories returned, their prayers for their late mother continued, and laughter filled the spaces where silence once lingered. For Daniel, every sound of joy in the house was a reminder that love, though tested, had not been broken. Laura's absence was never questioned. The girls asked less and less about her as time passed, their memories of cruelty fading into the background of a new life. She became to them nothing more than a shadow, a name associated with pain but not permanence. Her downfall had been swift and complete, her perfect facade destroyed beyond repair. For Daniel, it was never about revenge but about restoration. Watching Jasmine and Jade thrive, seeing their confidence bloom again, was the only justice he needed. In the end, Laura's arrogance crumbled, her schemes reduced to nothing. What remained was the unshakable bond between a father and his children, strengthened not by the absence of hardship but by their survival through it. Together they had built a fortress of trust that no betrayal could dismantle. Daniel often reflected on the lessons etched into their story. He realized how easily charm can mask cruelty, how evil often wears a smile that convinces even the cautious to let their guard down. But he also understood something far greater, that real love cannot be broken. The devotion he carried for his late wife, the bond he nurtured with Jasmine and Jade, these were the truths that outlasted lies. Evil can pretend, it can wound, it can even destroy moments of peace, but it cannot erase the kind of love that roots itself in sacrifice and protection. The laughter of his daughters proved it daily. The warmth of their hugs, the whispered "I love you, Daddy," were testaments to the resilience of family. Daniel no longer lived in fear of betrayal. He lived in gratitude for the love that survived it. And so, their story closed not with despair, but with dignity. The woman who sought to manipulate, betray, and divide them was left in ruins, her name marked by shame, while Daniel's home stood stronger than ever. Jasmine and Jade grew in the certainty that they were cherished beyond measure, raised by a father who chose them over everything else. Their bond became unbreakable, their laughter louder, their lives brighter. In the end, arrogance crumbles, but dignity survives. What would you have done if you were in his shoes? I'll be reading your comments. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos.